Marcus Stephen, born the 1st of October 1969, is a Nauruan politician and former sportsperson who previously was a member of the Cabinet of Nauru, and who served as President of Nauru from December 2007 to November 2011. The son of Nauruan parliamentarian Lawrence Stephen. Stephen was educated at St Bede's College and RMIT University in Victoria, Australia. Initially playing Australian rules football, he opted to pursue the sport of weightlifting, in which he represented Nauru at the Summer Olympics and Commonwealth Games between 1990 and 2002, winning 7 Commonwealth gold medals. After his retirement from weightlifting, Stephen worked at the Bank of Nauru before being elected to Parliament at the 2003 elections, having occupied various portfolios in the Nauruan government under President René Harris. Stephen was sworn in as president after moving a no-confidence motion against his predecessor, Ludwig Scotty. His term as president was marked by allegations of corruption and accusations of a coup d'état, as well as the declaration of a state of emergency and a suspension from Parliament by the Nauruan Supreme Court in 2008. 2 separate elections were called in April and June 2010 after accusations of bribery of government members of Parliament, with another state of emergency declared in the period between elections. Stephen resigned from the presidency in November 2011 after further allegations of corruption were raised by opposition factions, and was succeeded by Freddie Pitcher, but was reappointed to the cabinet in June 2012 by Pitcher's successor as president, Sprent Dabwido. Family background. Marcus Stephen's father, Lawrence Stephen, served as a member of the Parliament of Nauru from 1971 to 1977 and again from 1980 to 1986. He is related to the prominent KK family of Nauru. Education and background. Stephen received high school education in Australia attending St Bede's College, Melbourne, Victoria. He has a diploma in business accounting from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. From 2001 to 2003 he was employed in management at the Bank of Nauru. Sporting career. He initially played Australian rules football for the local team the Aces, but opted to pursue the sport of weightlifting. In 1989 the Nauru Weightlifting Federation, NWF, was founded, primarily to give Stephen, the sole top-class weightlifter in Nauru at the time, the opportunity to compete internationally. In 1992 he took part in his first Olympic Games in Barcelona. Since Nauru had no Olympic committee at the time, he successfully applied for Samoan citizenship and was allowed to compete for Samoa. In 1993 the committee was founded and Stephen was able to represent Nauru in the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta and the 2000 Summer Olympics in Sydney. When the Olympic torch was carried to Sydney, Stephen had the honour of being a torchbearer during its stopover in Nauru. It was at the Commonwealth Games where most of his successes came. In the 1990 Commonwealth Games he surprisingly won a gold medal in the snatch in the 60 kg class. In the 1994 Commonwealth Games he won 3 gold medals in the 59 kg class, and in the 1998 Commonwealth Games in the 62 kg class he collected 3 more golds. In his last games, the 2002 Commonwealth Games in Manchester, he won 3 silvers in the 62 kg class. At the 1999 World Championship in Athens he was runner-up in the clean and jerk in the 62 kg class. In 2005 he was elected member of the International Weightlifting Federation Hall of Fame. In March 2008, it was reported that Stephen had been appointed to the presidency of the Oceania Weightlifting Federation, the Pacific region's official continental weightlifting body. In January 2009, he was elected president of the Nauru National Olympic Committee, defeating Vincent de Tenamo, who had been president of the committee since its recognition by the International Olympic Committee in 1994. Political career. Since 1997 he has been the treasurer of the Nauru Olympic Committee. On 3 May 2003 Stephen was elected to the Nauru Parliament with a score of just over 215 points, achieving first place in the EWA in Anetan constituency. During the presidency of René Harris, Stephen was Education and Finance Minister of Nauru from 8 August 2003 until the 22nd of June 2004, a post he had to relinquish when Ludwig Scotty became the new president. In October 2004 he was re-elected to Parliament. Following his re-election in October 2004 into the Parliament of Nauru, Stephen was appointed as Minister for Nauru Phosphate Royalties Trust. During his first term, due to the nature of a small island developing state, SIDS, such as Nauru, with a political system relying on independent politicians, Stephen synergized several ministry posts including Minister for Economic Development and Industry, Minister responsible for good governance, Minister for Justice, Police and Prisons and Internal Affairs. Between November 2004 and May 2006 Stephen held chairmanship of the Nauru Fisheries and Marine Resources Authority, later becoming Minister for Nauru Fisheries and Marine Resources on 13 November 2007. After Nauru joined the International Whaling Commission, IWC, on 15 June 2005, Stephen was nominated as a delegate for Nauru. He represented Nauru at the IWC Congress in June 2005 in the South Korean city of Ulsan. Stephen was re-elected to Parliament in the August 2007 parliamentary election. He unsuccessfully stood as a presidential candidate in the vote held in Parliament on 28 August, in which Scotty was re-elected. However, following a successful vote of no confidence in Parliament against President Scotty on 19 December 2007, Marcus Stephen was sworn in as President of Nauru. President of Nauru equals 2007 equals. In the initial period of his administration, Stephen moved to continue the practice, commenced by former President Ludwig Scotty, of appointing a separate Foreign Affairs Minister. When Dr. Kieran Kakette, a cousin of Stephen, was installed in that post in December 2007. Previously, each President of Nauru had concurrently acted as his own Foreign Affairs Minister, although this was customary rather than a constitutional requirement. Stephen also appointed Freddie Pitcher as Finance Minister, and his administration inherited the austerity measures associated with the outgoing Scotty administration. Regarding constitutional affairs, however, one of the major issues facing the new Stephen administration was the process of constitutional revision consultations, started by former President Ludwig Scotty. These centered mainly on proposals to elect the President of Nauru by direct popular election, rather than indirectly by the Parliament of Nauru, and which would thus restrict somewhat the frequent recourse to the vote of no confidence, which has been a feature of Nauru's political life for many years. Since Marcus Stephen came to office in circumstances involving the overturning of the previous government's parliamentary majority in just such a manner, it remained to be seen what the Stephen administration's formal position and practice on this issue would be. At a personal level, the appointment of Marcus Stephen as President of Nauru at the age of 38, together with a youthful ministerial team, marked somewhat of a generational shift from some of the political figures who have dominated Nauruan politics in recent years. E.g., he was nearly 40 years younger than Darog Dora, who served as President of Nauru in 2003, having entered the Parliament of Nauru in 1968. before the birth of Stephen. However, the appointment of youthful heads of state in the Republic of Nauru is by no means unknown. Bernard Dabwido assumed the office of President of Nauru at the even younger age of 30 in 1976. It may be added that since Stephen's presidency was to last a few years, his actual experience of office was to grow to be much longer than that of several previous holders of the same office. 2008 Political turmoil In March 2008, moves in the Parliament of Nauru to unseat the administration of Marcus Stephen by means of a vote of no confidence were thwarted by the resignation of the Speaker. Ridlakua. Unrest on the island, which involved threats to export trade and the torching of a police station, were events which occurred shortly prior to parliamentary moves to remove President Stephen and his administration from office. At the end of the first 3 months of Stephen's presidency, there was thus widespread unrest in the country. Stephen and Speaker of Parliament accusations. On the 22nd of March, the Speaker of the Parliament of Nauru, David Adiang, called a parliamentary session, allegedly without informing government ministers, who therefore did not attend. Opposition MPs, Adiang included, constituted a majority of legislators present, and passed a ruling outlawing dual citizenship for members of parliament. The ruling, if applied, would have affected senior cabinet ministers Kieran KK and Freddie Pitcher, had they been compelled to resign from parliament. The opposition would have controlled a majority of seats in parliament. The government rejected the legitimacy of the ruling, stating that it was unconstitutional because of the lack of parliamentary quorum. President Marcus Stephen accused Adiang and the opposition of passing the ruling after dark on Easter Saturday, under candlelight. On the 31st of March, Adiang claimed that the Stephen administration had mounted a coup d'état because the loyalty of the police to the rule of parliamentary law was no longer present. After the police refused to eject KK and Pitcher from the chamber of the parliament. Coup allegations. The Stephen administration, in response, denied the claim of a coup d'état, stating that they were awaiting a ruling from the Supreme Court on the issue. The crisis continued into early April 2008, with Adiang stating that he would consider the Supreme Court's ruling as just an opinion, in KK responding that the Supreme Court, not the Speaker, had the jurisdiction to determine a Member of Parliament's eligibility. Supreme Court ruling. A ruling by the Supreme Court in April 2008 that the Speaker of the Parliament of Nauru had erred in seeking to exclude from Parliament 2 key ministers, who also made up the government's majority, was seen to have enhanced the constitutionality of the Stephen administration's makeup. Relations between the Stephen administration and Adiang remained under severe strain, however, and the administration's ministers continued to exercise executive powers without the support of an absolute parliamentary majority. Stephen suspended from Parliament. By the 10th of April, the tenuous connection between the rule of the Stephen administration and the Parliament of Nauru was further diminished. President Stephen and the 8 other members of the 18-member parliament who supported his administration were suspended from the parliamentary sitting, amidst rowdy scenes, by the Speaker, David Adiang, who had difficulty in making himself heard when commenting on the recent Supreme Court decision regarding dual nationality for MPs. State of emergency and second administration. On the 18th of April 2008, Stephen declared a state of emergency and called a snap election to end months of political deadlock. At the election held on the 26th of April 2008, Marcus Stephen's supporters gave his administration a majority in the Parliament of Nauru. Prior to the 24th of April 2008 general election, the 18 members of the Parliament of Nauru became a hung Parliament split 9-9 between the supporters of President Stephen and the splinter group led by Foreign Minister David Adyang. In the snap parliamentary election, which consisted of 5,017 voters across 8 constituencies and the 18 seats, the 9 pro-government members held their seats while the anti-Stephen members were reduced to 6, replaced by 3 newly elected MPs who sided with President Stephen. As a consequence, Stephen was re-elected as President of Nauru after holding his Anetan constituency seat. Moves to expand private banking facilities. The Stephen administration announced in November 2008 moves to expand private banking facilities in Nauru. These were mooted as being designed to confront commercial stagnation. 2009 equals. The year 2009 opened with the Stephen administration enjoying a more consolidated position than it had experienced in its first few months of existence. See above. Marcus Stephen #Political Turmoil equals 2010. Political turmoil and state of emergency equals. In late 2009 or early 2010, the Stephen cabinet rejected a proposed loan from Australian company Getax, which buys Nauruan phosphate. Getax offered Nauru a loan of $25 million, with a 15% interest rate, which, according to a later investigation by newspaper The Australian, would be likely to have resulted in the country defaulting on its repayments, triggering contract provisions that would have let Getax take over the Nauru-owned phosphate industry. The government refused the offer. Stephen later explaining, "It would have been disastrous for Nauru. We had defaulted on one payment. We would have lost the phosphate industry." Cabinet unanimously rejected it. Quote, shortly thereafter, Getax organized and funded a trip to Singapore for all 6 opposition MPs, as well as 3 non-cabinet government MPs. Following the trip, the latter 3 defected to the opposition, and the Stephen government's parliamentary majority shrank from 12-6 to 9-all, leaving Parliament deadlocked. Following repeated unsuccessful bids by the opposition to lodge motions of no confidence in the government of Marcus Stephen, early elections were held in April 2010. They resulted in all sitting MPs being re-elected, prompting fresh, equally inconclusive elections in June. Following opposition attempts to prevent a presidential election by MPs, Stephen declared a state of emergency. The government officially reported that it was continuing its functions in a transitory capacity, in accordance with Articles 16 and 20 of the Constitution, until a president could be elected by a majority in Parliament. Article 16.4 states that the president will remain at his post until a new president is elected, while Article 20 states that cabinet members' mandates end when a new president is elected. The opposition challenged the state of emergency, a challenge which was thrown out by the Supreme Court in October, on the grounds that it is the president's constitutional prerogative to determine whether a state of emergency exists. A few days later, after Australian officials had confidentially expressed concern to the government of Nauru over Getax's alleged role in the destabilization of the country, Stephen's government asked Australia to investigate the activities of Getax and any financial ties it may have with politicians in Nauru, namely members of the opposition. Stephen and Justice Minister Matthew Batsiua asked for an Australian investigation into money allegedly paid by Getax to members of the opposition, which they suggested might constitute bribes. Nauru's Director of Public Prosecutions stated there had been attempts to bring about a change of government by bribery of members of Parliament, and Stephen released documents showing opposition members on salaries of less than $150 a week, spending significant sums of cash on boats. cars, voters and trips. The allegations were that Gatex had bribed opposition members, both through personal donations and by financing their election campaigns, in the hopes that the opposition would win power and sign the deal enabling the loan which the Stephen administration had rejected. The allegation was also that Gatex had bribed non-cabinet government MPs in an attempt to undermine Stephen's parliamentary majority and bring down his government, and that these actions had resulted in the early 2010 parliamentary deadlock, the 2010 elections and the accompanying political crisis. Nauru's Commissioner of Police lacked the resources to mount an investigation that would span Singapore, Australia and Nauru, hence Nauru's request to Australia. In response to the request, the Australian Federal Police began an investigation into the allegation that Gatex had bribed Nauruan opposition MPs. A few days after that, Ludwig Scotty accepted the position of Speaker in Parliament, enabling a presidential election to take place. Marcus Stephen was duly re-elected president, with a workable parliamentary majority, defeating Milton Dube by 11 votes to 6. The state of emergency was consequently lifted. Scotty explained that he remained a member of the opposition, but that he had accepted the position of Speaker so that Parliament could function, giving the opposition a say in government, and so that a budget could be adopted. He explained that his decision was also due to the allegations over opposition members receiving financial support from Gatex. Post-presidency. On 10 November 2011, President Marcus Stephen resigned from the presidency amid corruption allegations leveled by the Nauruan opposition. Opposition MPs accused Stephen of seeking to illegally profit from a phosphate deal. Stephen called the charges unwarranted and mischievous. He resigned the presidency, but remained in Parliament. He was succeeded by one of his allies, Freddie Pitcher, who was removed 5 days later, and replaced by Sprent Dabwido. Stephen remained in opposition until June 2012, when he was given the portfolios of Commerce, Industry and Environment, Nauru Phosphate Royalties Trust, and Fisheries in Dabwido's new cabinet. Stephen contested his Anetan constituency during the Nauruan parliamentary election 2016 but lost his seat in Parliament. See also: Politics of Nauru, Political families of the world, #Nauru, Nauruan parliamentary election, 2008. References: External links. Official biography on the website of the Parliament of Nauru. President Stephen's address to the United Nations General Assembly on 24 September 2008. Stephen. Countries least responsible for climate change are most threatened by it. Video report by Democracy Now! A sinking feeling. Why is the president of the tiny Pacific island nation of Nauru so concerned about climate change? By Marcus Stephen in the New York Times Upfront, November 2011.